VMware license changes impact security patches. VMware customers holding perpetual licenses without current support contracts are being blocked from accessing critical security patches through Broadcom's support portal, according to a report. Broadcom's decision to restrict patch access has redrawn the boundaries of acceptable vendor behavior, said Sanchit Gogia, Chief Analyst and CEO at Greyhound Research. This isn't just about patch policy. It's about shifting software ownership norms from permanence to conditionality. In an era where delayed remediation can lead to breach exposure or compliance failure, the right to patch must be decoupled from subscription status, Gogia explained. He added that CISOs must now treat patch access as a board-level assurance issue. In this new landscape, licensing must be treated as a live operational dependency, not a closed financial transaction, Gogia explained. The ruling sends a clear message. Operational disruption caused by license enforcement is no longer a private matter. It's a justiciable event with reputational and financial consequences, Gogia noted. Enterprises must no longer assume that perpetual licensing guarantees long-term access to updates or support, Gogia advised. Instead, they must embed entitlement protection clauses, including escrow-backed patch rights and enforceable continuity terms, directly into vendor contracts. As quoted in Network World, in an article authored by Gyana Swain published on July 24, 2025. Beyond the media quote, our view in full. Press for time? You can focus solely on the Greyhound flashpoints that follow. Each one distills the full analysis into a sharp, executive-ready takeaway, combining our official standpoint, validated through Pulse data from ongoing CXO trackers, and grounded in field notes from real-world advisory engagements. Enterprises must rethink software contracts amid Broadcom VMware fallout. Greyhound Flashpoint, Broadcom's decision to restrict patch access for VMware customers without active support contracts has redrawn the boundaries of acceptable vendor behavior. Per Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025, 63% of CIOs globally now consider post-acquisition licensing continuity a non-negotiable clause in enterprise software deals. This isn't just about patch policy. It's about shifting software ownership norms from permanence to conditionality. In this new landscape, licensing must be treated as a live operational dependency, not a closed financial transaction. Greyhound standpoint. According to Greyhound Research, the Broadcom VMware episode is a cautionary case of license enforcement overriding service reliability. Enterprises must no longer assume that perpetual licensing guarantees long-term access to updates or support. Instead, they must embed entitlement protection clauses, including escrow-backed patch rights and enforceable continuity terms, directly into vendor contracts. This includes reviewing existing agreements for M&A override risks and introducing contractual triggers for renegotiation. Procurement, legal, and risk functions must work in concert to simulate post-acquisition scenarios and define a minimum viable operational standard that must be preserved under all conditions. Greyhound Pulse. Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025 shows that 58% of enterprise buyers globally have now elevated license termination risk into their Tier 1 vendor evaluation frameworks. Of these, 34% have already restructured their procurement documentation to include hard-coded entitlements for patch access, support continuation windows, and dispute escalation procedures. This recalibration is particularly visible in financial services and telecoms, where long asset cycles and infrastructure dependencies make forced migrations prohibitively complex. Vendor trust is no longer inferred from brand legacy. It must be contractualized. Greyhound Field Note. Advisory guidance from recent Greyhound boardroom simulations suggests that logistics and manufacturing enterprises relying on VMware-based workloads must now proactively audit support expiry timelines against critical infrastructure. In one advisory construct, a firm experienced compliance friction when a previously entitled patch became unavailable due to a lapsed support contract. Greyhound recommends that CIOs classify all perpetual licenses into operationally safe, support uncertain, and at-risk tiers. For the latter, organizations should develop financial scenarios for support reentry, replatforming options, or third-party maintenance. Enterprise contracts must be reviewed with external counsel to pre-negotiate entitlement grace periods and secure patch access during transitional support lapses. Delayed VMware security patches pose governance and disclosure risks. Greyhound Flashpoint. Withholding patches due to expired support contracts introduces a high-severity governance challenge for security leaders. Per Greyhound CISO Pulse 2025, 49% of CISOs now include vendor-driven patch inaccessibility as a top 10 risk in their board disclosures. In an era where delayed remediation can lead to breach exposure or compliance failure, the right to patch must be decoupled from subscription status and hardwired into vendor due diligence frameworks. Greyhound standpoint. According to Greyhound Research, CISOs must now treat patch access as a board-level assurance issue. When vendors make patch delivery contingent on active financial relationships, it materially undermines the enterprise's ability to maintain security baselines. Security leaders should quantify such exposure using licensing lag risk metrics, estimating the time gap between CV publication and in-house remediation capability under different vendor policies. Additionally, organizations should define compensating control readiness thresholds that trigger internal mitigation protocols when patches are delayed or inaccessible due to licensing friction. The conversation around patching has moved beyond IT ops. It's now embedded in fiduciary oversight. Greyhound Pulse. Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025 indicates that 61% of CISOs in high-regulation sectors now include patch access entitlements in their security vendor scorecards. A full 47% have modified their risk registers to account for delayed patching caused by vendor contract disputes. Notably, 36% report that at least one instance of patch delay has been flagged as a disclosure event to the board or to regulators in the past 12 months. This signals a tectonic shift from informal patching expectations to formalized risk metrics with audit trails. Greyhound Field Note. Based on advisory modeling by Greyhound Research for financial sector clients, delayed access to hypervisor security patches, particularly in virtualized payment systems, should trigger rapid deployment of microsegmentation and enhanced telemetry. In one construct, patch unavailability forced the CISO to initiate interim controls, including container isolation, endpoint rollback buffers, and WEF updates across all east-west traffic zones. These measures were classified as patch deferral compensations and appended to the organization's quarterly board risk memo. Greyhound recommends that all CISOs formalize a patch unavailability protocol with predefined internal thresholds for board-level alerts, policy exceptions, and insurance policy recalibration. Dutch court ruling reshapes global software licensing expectations. Greyhound Flashpoint. The Dutch court's ruling against Broadcom has reframed how software vendors are expected to honor licensing continuity post-acquisition. Per Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025, 57% of enterprise CIOs across EMEA and APAC are now embedding legal fallback provisions into software agreements, including mandatory support continuity clauses. The ruling sends a clear message. Operational disruption caused by license enforcement is no longer a private matter. It's a justiciable event with reputational and financial consequences. Greyhound standpoint. According to Greyhound Research, the Dutch court's intervention has fundamentally altered how enterprise buyers assess legal recourse in software disputes. Where once support termination was seen as a vendor's prerogative, it is now being weighed against public interest, service continuity, and duty of care principles. As vendors pursue aggressive monetization strategies, enterprise procurement leaders must respond with enforceable legal mechanisms that guarantee patch access and support for a minimum migration period. This includes invoking jurisdictional protections, aligning with regulatory authorities, and introducing exit assistance as a contractual right rather than a post-facto negotiation. Greyhound Pulse. Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025 reveals that 46% of global CIOs have either enacted or are in the process of drafting standard clauses that mandate 12 to 24 months of support continuity in the event of vendor M&A or pricing realignment. In the EU alone, 68% of public sector CIOs are now required by law or policy to confirm such provisions exist for critical infrastructure platforms. Simultaneously, regulators are beginning to probe software vendors whose M&A strategies result in forced migrations without adequate notice or operational handholding. The vendor-customer relationship is evolving into a legally balanced contract of operational duty, not just a commercial transaction. Greyhound Field Note. Advisory experience from Greyhound's work with public sector clients in Europe suggests that CIOs must operationalize service continuity as a contractual clause and not rely on discretionary vendor support post-M&A. In one such construct, a large transport agency introduced a support assurance buffer clause that mandated a 24-month tail of full vendor patching obligations, enforceable via financial penalties and regulator notification rights. The clause was triggered upon any announced change in licensing structure or pricing model. Greyhound recommends that enterprise CIOs, particularly in essential services, Work with external legal advisors to benchmark vendor contracts against this precedent and file advanced service continuity riders as part of strategic platform renewals. Analyst in focus, Sanchit Gogia. Sanchit Gogia, or SVG as he is popularly known, is a globally recognized technology analyst, innovation strategist, digital consultant, and board advisor. SVG is the chief analyst, founder and CEO of Greyhound Research, a global, award-winning technology research, advisory, consulting, and education firm. Greyhound Research works closely with global organizations, their CISOs, and the board of directors on technology and digital transformation decisions. SVG is also the founder and CEO of the House of Greyhound, an eclectic venture focusing on interdisciplinary innovation. Copyright policy. All content contained on the Greyhound Research website is protected by copyright law and may not be reproduced, distributed, transmitted, displayed, published, or broadcast without the prior written permission of Greyhound Research or, in the case of third-party materials, the prior written consent of the copyright owner of that content. You may not alter, delete, obscure, or conceal any trademark, copyright, or other notice appearing in any Greyhound Research content. We request our readers not to copy Greyhound Research content and not republish or redistribute them, in whole or partially, via emails or republishing them in any media, including websites, newsletters, or intranets. We understand that you may want to share this content with others, so we've added tools under each content piece that allow you to share the content. If you have any questions, please get in touch with our community relations team at connect@thoffer.com.